That new intro video by Graphic Burns never gets old. But coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about the latest in free agency for Cleveland. Mary Kay touched on whether or not the Browns have any interest in Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt, or Ezekiel Elliott, or any other big-name running backs. So we'll dive into that. Plus, I want to wrap up the show by talking about the NFL Supplemental Draft. There have been some notable Cleveland Browns players selected in it. So could we see the Browns take the only player in it at this year's draft? Now, before we get into all that, help us grow the channel this offseason. Share this video, and hey, if we beat our shares record, which is 33 over the last 90 days, I'm going to start a future show off by getting a full dog bowl in. There's no better way to wake up in the morning than take down an entire dog bowl. So if we get more than 33 shares, we'll get that going. So send it to a friend, send it to a family member, and if you share it on Twitter and tag me, we give shout-outs here. Billy Lingrel, Joshua Heisler, Cam from Canada is one big Browns fan. There is no denying that. Joshua Miller and Dog Pound Derek, thank you guys so much for sharing our content over on Twitter. Tag me at Matthew Petey. Now let's jump into the Mary Kay article in which she had a mailbag and was asked about adding another running back, and she said, I do think the Browns will add another running back before the season, but it won't be a big-name back such as Dalvin Cook or Ezekiel Elliott, and they won't re-sign Kareem Hunt. I think it'll be a potential number 3 back behind Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford, who can serve as a solid number 2 in the event of an injury and churn out 100 yards if both Chubb and Ford are hurt. To me, amen. I am ready for Jerome Ford to be this team's backup running back. I know we have talked at length this offseason about the RB2 spot, and when you have notable guys still in free agency like Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, or Kareem Hunt, there are going to be conversations had about, sure, maybe you don't sign him as your starting running back, but Ezekiel Elliott coming off the bench, that sounds like a Pro Bowl type lineup. But when you look at what these guys did last year, I don't care too much about the touchdowns or the yardage. It's the average, right? And it's getting up there in their career. And to me, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to try and squeeze out an extra season from Zeke or Dalvin Cook or Hunt when you have Jerome Ford. Sure, a player we haven't seen much of, but a guy who looked great coming out of college. He was awesome in the preseason, and I know it's just preseason. But what's the point of drafting players if the moment they're ready, not to take over as the starter, but just to be the backup? We just turn to free agency immediately and sign a veteran and never let Andrew Berry's draft picks have an opportunity. I don't understand of what's the point of the draft for the Browns if they just want to constantly turn to free agency to stunt their players' growth. If a player doesn't look so good, fine, turn to free agency. Case in point with Anthony Schwartz. But we have not had that opportunity with Jerome Ford. The guy only had 8 carries last year. Give him an opportunity. Give him a chance. If he does not look the part midseason, fine. I'm sure there will be some good running backs still out there that you can add to be the backup running back. Now, the only knock, well, not just the only knock, but maybe the biggest knock outside of experience on Jerome Ford is the pass blocking. He didn't do a ton of it in Cincinnati, and if he's going to be this team's RB2 and come onto the field for a 3rd and 9 from Cleveland's 35-yard line, he's going to have to hold his own in pass protection when opposing defenses are sending 4 or 5 guys, and he's got to be able to pick up a blitz. So if you don't think Jerome Ford does a good job of that, then I can see them turning to free agency for an RB3 who can step in on a obvious passing situation where maybe you don't want a running back to go out to the slot or go out to the flat for a route, but rather have him stay in the backfield to pick up a blitzer or be an extra blocker for this team. Now, I don't want to ask if the Browns should add another running back. I'm getting very tired of that question over and over again. It seems to be all over the place when it comes to Browns coverage. So, a different question, off-the-wall question here. Who was the Browns running back when you became a Browns fan? Was it Nick Chubb? And if that's the case, you're like 5 years old. Or do you go back a little bit further? Let me know who the Browns running back was when you first became a Cleveland Browns fan. Now, there are some notable free agent running backs still on the market. Zeke, Dalvin Cook, Kareem Hunt. Leonard Fournette would be interesting because I think he could be a good pass-protecting running back. James Robinson was recently released. I have major concerns over his injury status. J.D. McKissick would be a good passing target Royce Freeman, Kenyon Drake, Justin Jackson, Benny Snell. One guy I don't have on there, but I want to highlight, Darrell Henderson. Cleveland brought him in for a workout a couple of weeks ago. Now, they never signed him. I don't know if that's because the workout didn't go well or if they want to see what they have in Jerome Ford first, and they can always circle back to Darrell Henderson a little bit later. I would think if Henderson was awesome in the tryout or the workout or whatever, they would have signed him probably right afterwards. But Henderson could be a good guy to watch for. He's good in pass protection. And I'm not going to ask him to do what LA asked him to do, which is to be that team's number one running back. He would be the RB3. He would be the pass protecting running back, special teams and whatnot. That's also a big factor. Your RB3 should be a contributor in special teams. Darrell Henderson might not be the best in that role, but if you're looking for pass protection, he's a good option at this point in the game. Zeke is one of the best in pass protection, but that's a very expensive RB3 because he's probably going to get still $4 to $5 million in free agency. And we have more coverage on today's show to get to, but before we do, we are so close to 20,000 subscribers, less than 50 away. Can we get there from today's video? 46 of you watching right now, help me out. Hit that sub button to get us to 20,000 subscribers. Now, the NFL Supplemental Draft will be here before you know it. And if you're unfamiliar with the Supplemental Draft, let me catch you up on basically what it is. So, we're going to have our first Supplemental Draft since 2019. Now, there's only one player in this draft. Legit. There's just one at the moment. Purdue wide receiver Milton Wright. And the reason is the Supplemental Draft is created for players who are ineligible for the NFL Draft, which is in April, but they can't go back to college either, right? That is basically the nuts and the bolts of the Supplemental Draft. You can't go, or for whatever reason you weren't in the NFL Draft in April, and you can't return to your college team for another season, so you're kind of stuck in no man's land. Now, there have been some notable Cleveland Browns players to come out of the Supplemental Draft. Bernie Kosar, if you remember, he was a first-round Supplemental Draft pick. He had some bizarre academic issues coming out of Miami, which didn't have him ready for the NFL Draft. Josh Gordon was a Supplemental Draft pick by the Browns, a second-round pick. The way it works is you forfeit your pick in next year's draft with whatever pick you use to get that player. So if no team values Milton Wright as a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, or seventh round pick, then he will go undrafted in the Supplemental Draft. But if there's a team out there going, hey, Milton Wright is going to be better than any wide receiver in round 4 next year, then it's a blind auction and they can offer up their 4th round pick. Now, as for Cleveland, does it make sense to pursue the former Purdue wide receiver? Well, their wide receiver room is jam-packed. And Milton Wright was not in the NFL Draft this year because he did not play at Purdue due to academic issues. So that is the in-betweener reason of why he can't go back to college, but he wasn't in this year's NFL Draft. But Brown specific here, I just don't see them having a spot for Milton Wright. Now, if they believe Milton Wright is this next Josh Gordon and he's going to be an under-the-radar acquisition, and Josh Gordon was really good coming out of Baylor. I mean, he didn't surprise too many people when he was a really good receiver to start, but unfortunately, he lived up to the reasons of why he was a Supplemental Draft player to begin with. But that's neither here nor there. I don't see Cleveland wanting to add more wide receivers to this room. I mean, someone's going to have to lose their job if that's the case. And I went on a long tangent during the Friday or Saturday's episode, I think Fridays, of not moving on from David Bell, your 3rd-round pick from last year. He's probably one of the last guys in for the wide receiver room because they've added so many players so far this offseason. But if they think Milton Wright is going to be a Josh Gordon caliber player and it's worth a 3rd or 4th-round pick in the future, then I suppose I can see them pulling the trigger on that. Andrew Berry has shown he will never be afraid to add more players to this wide receiver room. Every time you think they're done, they added Cedric Tillman in the draft. They traded for Elijah Moore. They signed Marquise Goodwin. They have made numerous moves. I would think they're tapped out, but maybe he wants to squeeze an extra one in if you think Wright is going to be this great Pro Bowl player in the future. So name a random Browns wide receiver. Josh Gordon, I think he's too good to qualify as a random Browns wide receiver, but let me know who your random Browns wide receiver is in the comments section below. Now, before we get on out of here, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. The NBA draft is just a few short days away, and here at Chat Sports, we get you guys live coverage for the entire NBA draft. No Taco Bell commercials when the future MVP is getting selected. So hang out with us here at Chat Sports for the NBA draft this Thursday night. And also, quick reminder to share today's video over on social media. And if you tag me on Twitter at Matthew Petey, I'll be sure to give you a shout out on a future show. No big deal or anything, but I am the reigning champ right now for picking a card. King of Diamonds will live forever. Jack Lauderay behind the camera today. Jack, what card? I dropped like 3 of them. Do you want to go with?
Let's go with, this is tough because I want to get it. 8 of clubs.
8 of clubs. I already know after getting the King of Diamonds, there's no way I'm getting it again. Give me the 2 of hearts. One last cut for good measure. Okay. 6 of clubs. 6 of clubs. Okay. You're not too far off. Exactly. That's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will sign off and see everyone later.